Hello. Waiting. Hi, everybody. It's After Hours Live, Wednesday, 6 o'clock. Ooh, turn that off. I don't need that. All right. Hello. Welcome. Welcome. All right. I have a lot of questions to go through today. So I am going to just really run through these very quickly and as thoroughly as I can. So I had, I think, like one more question left over from last week. So I'm just going to answer that. I thought I had much more, but I actually only missed one. So I have one question that was left over from last week, and that question was, will Prince of Oranges come back soon? Luca Jelinek posted that. Luca, they're back. We have 4-inch Prince of Orange dropped in the shop yesterday. So stop by Shaw, go pick one up, order one online, local pickup or delivery. Do it to it. Okay. And then I have a lot of questions from this week to answer. So let's get it popping. Hello. All right. Question is, where do I want to start? Top or bottom? I'll start from the bottom. So one question was, my large snake plant keeps having leaves droop and I'm not sure why. It was just repotted. That might be why. Plants usually go through an acclimation period when they get repotted. So it's pretty normal for your plant to just kind of like freak out a little bit for the first like 2 to 3 weeks after you repot it, whether that's a snake plant, something as resilient as a snake plant, all the way to something super delicate like a fern or calathea. So that would be what I would think is happening, especially because when you repot something, inevitably, no matter how careful you are, you're going to damage some roots. So it could have just like nicked a root, and that is just transferring that damage from the root to the leaf, because those pieces are interconnected. So if you're just noticing a couple leaves drooping after a repot, that would be what I would say. It is pretty normal also for snake plant leaves to droop if they're underwater. Like if it's really wrinkly and like pruny almost looking and it's just like flopping over, you may be taking your snake plant care a little too literally. They do need to be watered like at some point. So if you're noticing that they do look kind of shriveled, they are flopping over eventually. They could need to be watered. If it doesn't look wrinkly and you do water it regularly, not like once a month is usually okay. But if it's like more than that, then you're probably underwatering. But also what can happen is snake plants are very tolerant of low light. And they won't have like a lot of change in their appearance if they are in a very low light situation. No plant is a no light plant. Every plant needs light. So sometimes what can happen is those like really long growth is the snake plant like searching for any kind of light. It's like, please give me light. And if it gets really long and it doesn't find that light because it's staying in a low light situation, it'll just flop over because it can't sustain that growth. That was like, it's like last ditch effort to like try to find some sun. And then when that didn't work, it was like, this is too much energy to sustain this huge leaf. That was like my mission for sun. So it might just flop over. If it's pretty dramatically flopped over, just a water might not bring it back. So you can just cut it. And if it's not super like mushy, you can even try to propagate it. But I would recommend, either A, give it a little bit more water, or B, give it a little bit more sun. And at the end of the day, if you don't like those floppy leaves, just cut them off. I just want to address in the chat, somebody said my snake plant looks ashy, which is just so funny. So couple questions. Is it ashy? Like, what kind of snake plant is it? Did it look like that when you bought it? Um, and then also, it might be, if it looked like that when you bought it, and it's definitely not just like the pattern of the snake plant, it might actually be like dirt or fertilizer from the greenhouse. So this is pretty common on like a lot of plants when you first buy them from the garden center, or even from a retail shop. When they're shipped, they get a lot of like dirt and dust, from just being outside at the grower, as well as fertilizer. Like they really liberally spray fertilizer onto the plant and, nutrient. And that can create like a thin layer of pretty hard to get rid of dust on the plants. So you'll want to clean those. You'd be amazed, like if you just take like a microfiber cloth or a paper towel to your plants, how much of that stuff will come off. Cleaning your plants is really, really, really important. We talk about that a lot here. So try that. If it's none of those things, it could be a pest. So look out for that. Sorry, I thought it would be bright enough in here, but I guess the storm is deciding to show up right now and be super dark. So I'm going to turn this light on. Hold, please. Ugh, okay. It's a little better. Oh, it's just kind of weird. Anyway, we're rolling with it. It's alive. Ooh, I have another question in the chat. Okay, hold on. I have had a golden Pultose for 2 years and it did really well and the vines became really long. Recently, the leaves turned brown and died, and now only the ends of the vines are alive. Great question. So this will happen with any vining plant. Oh, you did see webbing. You can propagate the end of the vines. It could have been a pest, especially if you saw webbing. Webbing sometimes is also just like a normal spider. Like if you had this plant like up on a shelf and you never really took it down, it could just be like a spider. That's pretty normal. I get spiders in my plants all the times. And honestly, sometimes I leave them because then they'll eat other bugs and catch fungus gnats. But if you don't want to have an ecosystem in your home, that's a very fair point. Ruling out spider mites just based on webbing, because I think the thing that's actually happening here is etiolation. So with vining plants, in the wild, a pothos does not necessarily hang down. It actually runs up a tree. And this helps the pothos find the best spot in the canopy to get patches of sunlight, because there's a lot of competition for sunlight in the tropics. There's a lot of biodiversity. So if you have a pothos for a long time and you let it dangle really far down and the vines go really long, the leaves that are farthest from the sun, because the end of the plant is seeking the sun, are always going to die no matter what. They're the oldest leaves. They're always going to die. So if you don't ever cut the vine, you're going to end up with probably like a foot and a half of leaves and then just bare stem. What you have to do to kind of like get a full look without getting like a bald top and then just long strands with ends is you kind of always have to have this like propagation cycle. So it'll get to a certain point, you can kind of cut it, leave it, and then keep it in the top. And that way you have, it's almost like layering your hair. So if you're a person who's ever layered your hair, you'll always have like volume at the entirety of like the body of hair, right? So do the same thing with your plants. The only way to get around that, if you do want to keep super long, this kind of like lets you get away with having super long vines because the top is still really full. And then you just have more and more vines in the pot. So it kind of like doesn't really matter. Or you have to give the pothos, which is traditionally a low light plant, much more light, because if you give it more light, it will have more energy to be able to sustain more leaves along the entirety of the plant. I hope that that helps. Um, okay, I have a question in the chat. I love when the chat is popping. I have a question in the chat from CG Schreibner about their prickly pear. And I did, your question was next on my list, but I'll just read it out here. I have a prickly pear that has these outgrowths from its pads. They are thin and lighter green than the rest of the cactus. They are several inches tall, but they don't seem to be turning into pads or flowers. Thoughts? So those definitely are pads. Like siphoned off in my room right now, not near my plants, but they definitely are pads. What I find is when you buy your plant, you're especially a puntia, they are coming from a grower. They're getting like optimal sunlight, optimal nutrient, optimal everything. So the pads are necessarily going to be like more mature, more developed, bigger, fatter, everything else. When you then bring it inside, here's a window. When a plant is outside, it's getting 180 degrees of sun. So most of the cactus that are grown for indoor use are grown under a shade cloth, but they're still getting 180 degrees of sun all the hours that there are daylight. When it's inside, our plants are just getting that angle of sunlight from the window. So if you have a window here, it's only getting that angle of sun. Especially if it's a cactus getting direct sunlight. Hopefully it's south or west because there's just more hours of direct sunlight, but it's still only getting like a small fraction of what it used to get. That's why a lot of times when you have an Opuntia or a Cereus, you'll notice that all of the new growth is like really skinny because it's doing the best that it can. So what I've noticed with Opuntia too is one season of growth will be like those long, skinny pads that look kind of like silly. Best case scenario, really just give the plant as much sun as possible. However, I've noticed that the next year, those pads will actually fatten out and not be so skinny and like delicate. And then they will support the new growth, which will again look like that. So if it looks a little funky right now, just hold tight. Next year, once those paddles have had an opportunity to mature, and then they will be the ones that produce the new growth for the next season, they'll actually widen out and look a little better. But if they don't, it needs more sun. I hope that that helps. And that is, yes, what you asked for. Flowers are really tough. You're going to have to give it a lot of time in the current pot that it's in, a lot of time in a lot of sun. Flower, usually with any kind of house plants, like flowers is really dependent on time of year, how long it's been in a pot. It needs to be like a little stressed. And then flower production requires a lot of energy. So usually the plant needs to be exposed to like a lot of sunlight, which once it's getting an adequate amount of sunlight, like just for the plant in general, like it's consistent and it's like found its groove, then just nature takes over. Once it's like 40 days of 12 hours of darkness and 12 hours of sunlight or something crazy like that, some nature's algorithm, it'll start to produce flowers, but I wouldn't expect it for a while. That's just how it works. Somebody asked, does a plant light work? Plant lights do work. You want to find full spectrum bulbs, specifically that are for grow lights. There's lots and lots and lots of them. I am notorious as somebody who is a beginner with plant lights. So when I find ones that I like, I will let you all know. I will say that the ones that we utilize in our store, they're like Lumaram bulbs. They're awesome. They are commercial light bulbs and they're very expensive. So not really super accessible. But when I figure out something that is a little more accessible and that I have personal experience and can vouch for, I will let you all know. But plant lights do work. I highly recommend doing your research and just kind of figuring out what your needs are and going from there. Because there's a lot of information out there. It can be a little overwhelming, but I'm parsing through it too. I have a question that I'm going to put in the chat really quick. Why does my peace lily flower bloom in the winter? So again, this could be that where your peace lily is in your home during the winter, what I find is like sometimes a lot of houseplants will actually flop and bloom in the winter because they're getting more direct sun, even though they are um, like getting less hours of daylight. Like, for example, well, I live above the tree line, the trees are like right here. But like in the winter, there will be no leaves on the tree. So anything right now that's being shaded in my house by the tree and is getting indirect light will get totally direct sun in the wintertime. So sometimes that contributes to it. That would be my guess. I hope that helps. Okay. In the chat, someone asks, I brought home an Alocasia black velvet and it's already dropping 2 leaves. It's against an east-facing window. What do I do? Totally normal. Alocasias have a lot of drama when they're first acclimating to a new environment. Other thing to know about alocasias as well is that they are always going to drop a leaf. It is necessary for the plant to survive that the oldest leaf has to die off in order for the plant to have energy for the newer leaf. Alocasias come from bulbs. So if you like pulled that out of the ground, you would see that it has like a tuber is what it grows out of. So it actually goes dormant in the winter. But since alocasias that we keep inside have such a consistent environment, they don't really go dormant for the winter. They usually just sustain less leaves, and you won't see anything like in the summertime. It's called like a corm is the type of bulb that it is. It will actually separate and it'll produce babies. And then the summer it'll like die back, or in the wintertime, excuse me. So totally normal. If you just brought it home, it's going to kind of freak out for a couple weeks. Just keep an eye on it. Make sure you don't overwater it. Make sure it's getting enough sun. The east facing window sounds perfect. And just check it for spider mites, because they can be really susceptible. And even if you don't have them on any other plants in your home, you never know. They could be like dormant, and then alocasias are a delicacy for them. I don't know why. So just be patient. It'll come back. It's a good time of year. Sometimes getting alocasias in the wintertime and like trying to acclimate them can be a nightmare. But you have a long runway ahead of you. I wouldn't be worried about it. Okay. So I can go back to, let me just make sure. Yeah. I'm going to go back to my submitted questions. Somebody asked, is there a way to safely transport, my plants cross country? So I talked about this last week, but I'm actually going to be like writing. I already wrote a blog and it's going to go up next week about moving with plants. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And that's going to cover everything that you should know before you move, during your move, and after your move. Easy answer right now for advice on moving your plants cross country is do it yourself. Most moving companies will not touch your plants. So definitely save up room in your personal vehicle. If you are not driving across the country with your stuff, you can ship some of them. You have to just make sure that you do it properly and you check like local guidance on shipping plants, because you don't want to ship like an invasive species somewhere and have it confiscated. or get like a fine or something. But most of the time, that's just like agricultural plants. It's not necessarily um, house plants, but you never know. So just check, just double check to be sure. I also would not recommend shipping like pottery. So you would have to unpot a lot of plants. Also, just makes it much lighter, which will be cheaper to ship. Something like a philodendron or pothos is going to be fine. It can get a little beat up. It can survive, temperature differences, etc. Something like a begonia or a calathea, not going to survive you shipping it, especially if you're not experienced in that. So you kind of got to just like figure out how much space you have in your car. If you're not driving, um, you know, I don't know, try shipping some things, give some stuff away from friend to friends, start your collection over again. I don't know. It's tough. I would make multiple trips cross country in my car for my plans. I have done at least 7 hours at this point. So I'd have to make some decisions, some tough decisions, but that would be my advice. Um, let's go to the next page. Okay. I don't know if they're in here right now. However, I got 6 questions from Liza Elizabeth, who is a follower, and I'm pretty sure I've had a conversation with them before about their plants, but they submitted a lot of questions. But I think that they submitted a lot of questions that most people ask themselves, especially early on in their plant journey. So I'm just gonna go through like as many as I can. But hopefully, I'm not sure if they're in the live right now, but if I don't get through all of them, not the worst thing, because hopefully they'll be in the live next week and we can go through it together. Oh, one more question in the chat is about spider mites, just following up on the spider mite situation, potentially in alocasias. So, go to for spider mites is usually dependent on the level of infestation. So, on our YouTube, we do have an ongoing pest series. The introductory video goes over like the sliding scale of treatment. So, if you're just trying to be preventative, this is what you should use. If you have a specific pest, we do break it out into different videos. But I do recommend watching the intro video because it lets you know, like, this is when to use hydrogen peroxide, this is when to use alcohol, this is when to use Castile soap, this is when to use neem, insecticide. There's a lot of different things, and there's a lot of information out there on the internet, and it can feel very conflicting. So that initial video just lets you know, like, these are all the products you can use. These are the ones you don't really need. These are the ones that I use and I've never had any issue with. And then I like to think about it and conceptualize it sliding scale. For spider mites, if it's something really early on, you can use watered down neem and just kind of like soak the plant. Whenever you use neem, you want to keep the plant out of direct sunlight. Um, if it's like a really bad infestation, you can go for like full blown neem, but I would say to be careful with the neem because it's easy to overdo it. Um, Honestly, if things are like really bad, like lots of webbing, lots of little bugs, lots of rapid leaf loss, I just go straight to insecticidal soap. I have too many plants. Something is sick constantly. I have some sort of pest that I'm battling at any given time. So I keep insecticidal soap in my home and I just use it. I don't want to mess around. I want whatever's on there to be dead immediately. I don't want to have to do like multiple treatments. So I usually try to like isolate, treat, and then just really like hammer it in until I know it's gone. So that way I spare myself a lot of time and heartache. Um, Thank you for that question. I love plugging the YouTube. We're live on YouTube as well as Instagram Live. Hello, YouTube. So all of these lives are also stored not only on our IGTV, but also on, well, not all of them, since I started going live on YouTube because I found out that that was a thing. They're on our YouTube, but the YouTube is also like an extension of our blog. So anything that is on our YouTube channel is also a blog, really just for preference. If you prefer to read and have like a reference in a blog, then you can go to the blog. If you prefer to watch videos, you can watch the videos. Oh yeah, I have lots of pests. When I moved, something had thrips, and now I keep finding thrips, mostly dead. They're like dead thrips. So I can't tell if I actually still have thrips or not. I don't know. I've been just like sanitizing everything as I go, checking plates under pots. That's where they hang out. So I pretty much wash all of my plants' plates once a week at this point, unless I don't see anything in it. But it's real. Anyone who tells you they have no pests and they have more than like 5 plants is a liar. They're a liar. Or they just don't know. But it's probably there. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. Okay, which one of Liza's questions do I want to start with? Okay, so this is an easy extension from us talking about um, spider mites and pests in general. So Liza asks, I have a gnat infestation and it's creeping me out. What to do? Gnats suck, but gnats are not really doing anything bad to your plant. It has to get really, really, really bad for them to actually start to harm your plant. Typically, the overwatering, like the presence of too much moisture in the soil, is going to harm your plant before the gnats do. But if you do not resolve the moisture issue, the gnats will continue to get worse until they are also contributing to the problem. So fungus gnats is a video in our pest series. Go check it out on YouTube. First things first, let the plant dry out. I know it hurts, but let it dry out. It's going to kill anything that is just developing in your soil. And I would also swear by yellow sticky traps. Those are great. It's going to kind of like short circuit the cycle of their life. So their eggs and larvae are in the soil, and then they are adults. They come out, they fly out, they return back to the soil to lay the eggs. So if you can snatch them, before they get out and can reproduce and go into other plants, etc., that's great. So letting the soil dry out, yellow sticky traps. And then if it is really, really bad, the next time you water, you can use hydrogen peroxide. So you water down hydrogen peroxide. It's going to sanitize the soil, if you will. I also like to use Castile soap. That works too if hydrogen peroxide kind of freaks you out. But really, if you don't consistently let the soil go through like dry periods, you're just going to continue to have fungus gnats. Also, fungus gnats in the summer are pretty much unavoidable. We live in a swamp, so they're everywhere, and it's a perfect environment. They never really go away because it stays so humid in DC. So if you can like dehumidify your home, reduce any kind of stagnant water, wash your produce, keep a lid on your garbage, things like that. Yeah, fans, huge. Keep the air circulating because that will help the plants dry out on a more routine basis. You just don't want anything stagnant. Wherever there's moisture that's just stagnant, there that's just where they want to live. So you don't need that. So that would be what I could recommend if you want more in-depth information on that. Again, we have a YouTube video on our channel. Which other one do I want? Because I got 1 minute left. Oh, I like this question. Is it possible to trick my plants to think that fall and winter is spring and summer? Um, yes. And like, yeah, kind of. It's mostly light. So the plants are responding to obviously our homes stay pretty similar temperature, but the humidity fluctuates greatly throughout the year. So if you can keep consistent humidity, consistent temperature, and you just amend the light for the plant, they'll just keep going. Most plants are not that sensitive. Like if they're a tropical, they're going to be really advantageous. So if you're giving them more light, more nutrient, it's very advantageous for them to just continue to grow. Again, because their environment in the wild is highly competitive. So if they have access to a resource that other plants don't, they're going to utilize it. This is especially the case for any like climbing plant. So if you want to supplement your plants with a grow light through the fall and winter, that's going to be the best thing for them. Um, Keeping in mind that regardless, like the plants do know what season it is. So just keep an eye on watering until you know for sure that your plant is responding to the grow light. And the way you'll know this is that the cadence of watering will keep up because typically, if you do not supplement with a grow light through the winter, watering is going to slow down a lot. Less sun, less energy, less water. All of that is going to decline in proportion throughout the like not non-growing season. So it's just maintaining. It's not getting larger. Again, there's exceptions to that. Like we talked about, sometimes plants grow more in the winter because they're getting that direct sun, what have you. But yeah, grow light is the easiest answer. And again, I'm not an expert in grow lights. I do have two at my house right now, though, that I am trying out, and I have been for several weeks. So it's coming. I'll come up with something soon, but I don't like to advise anybody on something that I've never experienced myself. So I'll keep you posted on the grow light situation. But yeah, Liza had a lot more questions, and I'm very much looking forward to getting to them next time, next Wednesday at 6. And I hope that she joins us. Probably send her a DM. But I hope that, all of these questions were helpful in my response. I really enjoy chatting with you guys, so please keep the questions in the chat coming. But yeah, until next time, have a good rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye. And bye, YouTube.